Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another highly controversial Propagandacast Addendum on, well, you know, the other faction, I think, which is actually largely alright with a single caveat or two, the Soviets. And again, largely fine. There are some weird bits when it comes to the Soviets, but overall, I think the Soviets are largely, well, fine. They're not super easy as the Americans, but, you know, again, we're now looking at a faction which, after several revisions, has now some kind of good sort of core design going. It's another aggressive faction, has access to some reasonably good tech, doesn't get rewarded though by getting free units, but on the other hand has some rather tough infantry that can sort of soak up a lot of damage, rush around. You got Molotovs, anti-tank grenades, sandbags, mines which are quite effective, demo charges, honestly I would like to see go personally. But an aggressive faction that can harass and disrupt their opponent. That's very much where the Soviets are to an extent. You know, they are harassers, disruptors, and then they sort of hit here and there. That way they can sort of push ahead rather aggressively. And then, of course, they got some very nasty light tanks, light vehicles. Station 6, which is actually a reasonably good tank destroyer, despite it being a light assault gun. The H-35, and of course, the excellent T-34-76, which is cheap and quite able to deal with a lot of things. I mean, again, it is an aggressive faction. It's also one of those, again, you know, rate as much more easily playable than some of the German ones, because again, once you get in that early advantage, you can usually hold on to it quite well unless you do something really silly and throw away your advantage, which of course some players will insist on doing. You got a lot of flexibility in where you want to go. You got powerful scout cars, penal troopers, snipers in theory, Maxims are good, mortars are good, field guns are good at dealing with things. You got, again, excellent light vehicles and tanks. I mean, you overall sort of got a lot of options. You can sort of choose to actually go in a lot of directions. Want to play, whoops, my apologies there. Want to go in a mobile aggressive fashion, you can do so. Slower fashion, you can do so as well, though you need to be a bit more mindful of things there if that is the direction you go in. So in that regard, the Soviets to me is just one of those factions again I can just, you know, pick up and just, you know, beat some Germans silly with, and generally do so without too much trouble. Again, the only caveat there being, as I've been pointing out in my videos, the Volksgrenadiers will still think they'd be nerfed, because the problem is, if you're going to be balancing around the Volksgrenadiers as being the base level, you're going to have to buff a lot of things, including the Grenadiers, which is also exceedingly silly. So at some point they're going to nerf them, but again, they need to then, you know, do a lot of rebalancing with the Oberkommando, because currently they're basically being born by the Volksgrenadiers, no matter how kind of busted they are. But that's another story. Now, the sort of big caveat I have got the Soviets as basically the penal troopers or the penal battalion. They just, honestly, they don't fit in. Like, you got conscripts, alright, 6-man infantry squad with rifles, and then you got this penal troopers 6-man squad with rifles shortly after. And that basically sort of leads to the problem then. How do you differentiate them then? Because you can't really, because either the penal troopers then, as they usually are, either end up not being played because the conscripts just work, or then they buff the penal troopers to make more stand out, but then they become too good and no one's really going to bother with the conscripts. And that's sort of the issue. There's units, as long as the units are so similar to each other and so close to each other in terms of the tech tree, you're not going to see, you know, particularly, you know, much help there, because again, they're going to be too good or they're going to be not good enough. And that's the problem there, in my opinion. Like, either they are too good or the not too good, because again, they're just so close to each other in tech and just sort of how they work. I mean, sure, they're satchel anti-tank satchels, but ultimately that's not the difference. You know, when again, the sort of main bit, you know, is still the rifles, and they have called for more DPS, but again, that's again very little differentiation in a sense. So I think what needs to happen overall, personally, is they basically just shift the penal troopers away from the Special Rifle Command, move towards mechanized armor command here, just overhaul them into sort of what they actually were, which were assault troops in the Second World War. That was primarily what they used for. So give them submachine guns, make them cheaper, make them easier to kill, but just, you know, make them assault troops, replace the submachine gun ability for the conscripts, for the upgrade for the doctrines, I don't know, SVT-40s or DP light machine guns, and then add in another unit to the Special Rifle Command, which would then be the Soviet Scout Infantry Squad, which was sort of, I imagine, sort of a 4 to 5-man infantry squad with SVT-40 semi-automatic rifles, the ability to cut off points fast, better than most other infantry. That way they'd be sort of harassers, disruptors, access to maybe booby traps, but also just ambush abilities. They'd be sort of more like oversized partisans that can actually stand up in a fight, and also you can't call them in wherever you want to. But basically that way you'd sort of have an infantry squad that's, you know, kind of good, but at the same time strongly differentiated from the others, because, you know, it'd be a smaller squad, again, be a more elite unit in a sense, and so squads were generally always under strength very rapidly. That apparently also had something to do with how the Soviets basically did replacements, which is they just rebuilt entire units instead of replacing troops as they went on. But overall, that could be sort of a way there. So again, you have a different unit that'd be sort of tough, would allow the Soviets to play differently. Again, they'd be sort of more harassy, flanky, disrupting, rather than just, seeking up big engagement and trying to win them that way, but also, functioning with the conscripts as well and other elements. You could maybe with some veterans abilities give them access to other stuff, like, I don't know, Pilfet, Panzerfaust and whatnot. That way giving them a bit more flexibility as then veterans up. That way giving, rewarding players for, preserving them and keeping them alive. That could thus, be an idea there with the, scout infantry squad. Again, it was sort of open up for more search strategies, and again, would sort of give the penal troopers more of an actual role, and would also help sort of just figure out what the hell they want to do with the Special Rifle Command, because right now, again, it's just, the point where you just get penal troopers and throw them at the enemy, and that, again, just feels a bit weird. And again, it just highlights just this clash between the penal troops and the conscripts, because, again, they can't really both be good at the same time, because one is just automatically in some way going to be better than the other, and that's the one that's going to be then primarily utilised, and then the other ones will complain. So better just differentiate them entirely, shift the way, and then add in some third element there in the Special Rifle Command, thus opening up for more search strategies, giving them a bit more fun to go on. And, also giving them something for the late game, but without necessarily buffing the conscripts, because as a rule of thumb, I'm generally not a fan of just buffing mainline infantry unless there's something extremely wrong. Hence why, for example, I'm not a fan of buffing grenadiers, because taken to the stream, they can be useful. They might not be quite full grenadier spam, but they're still not something to be scoffed at. So again, I'm not a fan of buffing grenadiers either, if I can absolutely avoid it, unless it's through, again, some sort of ability. And similarly, again, I'm not a fan of buffing conscripts. And thus, rather than just see the introduction of some kind of late game unit, again, in that regard, we can just shift the penal troopers in there, and again, give the Search some sort of more late game mobile firepower to work with the tanks. I mean, give them access to some grenades and anti-tank grenades and those late game penal troopers alongside the submachine guns, and they should work reasonably well, really. So those are sort of my thoughts. Again, well playable faction, the Soviets. Penal troopers just that really big oddity within the faction, but overall it's just a fun faction. You can sort of play in a lot of ways, very flexible, and it's certainly one of the ones I enjoy. I mean, overall to an extent I enjoy most of them to an extent, maybe not so much the Orbital Command West, because you have less room for things, and similarly the Brits aren't just very fun either, but that's usually because they're so cheesy. But overall, I mean, I tend to enjoy the Soviets, the Americans, despite complaining about and pointing out they're easy. I mean, to an extent that's kind of what makes them fun, but also the Wehrmacht. So, there's always a bit of enjoyment here and there. But yes, I'm sure this will be just as controversial as the previous episode. We'll have people screaming bias, because how dare I know how to play the Soviets, and so on. But anyways, again, penal troopers sort of the odd dock out, and I really wish they just sort of switched that with something else. I mean, again, just grab the sniper model, maybe some different voice lines, and there you go. Good to go. So that'll be it for today's episode again on the Search. If you liked it, subscribe, like, share, comment on it. If you'd like to do consider donating or pledging on Patreon. This is Imperial Dane signing off for another possibly controversial video down the road. Cheers, everybody.